Listen, the more you learn, the more you earn. Welcome back to another YouTube video. My name is Sabali Freeman. Today we're going to talk about some tips that you all can use to do well in General Chemistry 1 and 2. Pretty much after I finished my last summer class, which was Gen Chem 2, I've been kind of doing some thinking and just thinking about some of the things that I did in both of those classes to do well. And I want to share some of those tips with you all for anybody who is taking those classes this upcoming fall or spring, whatever, so that you all could do get in those classes as well. I did finish Gen Chem 1 with a B, which is good, and I finished Gen Chem 2 with an A minus, which is pretty good. So, it ain't the best grade, but nevertheless, it's still pretty good compared to what most students get in those classes. So, with that being said, we're just going to go ahead and hop into the video. So, the first thing I would say coming into these classes is to make sure that you have a positive mindset. You have to really comprehend that everything starts here, right? And your mindset is really going to create your reality, right? So if you have a positive mindset, your reality is going to be positive. If you have a negative mindset, your reality is going to be negative. So you don't want to go into these classes thinking that this class is super hard. I don't comprehend chemistry. I'm never going to use any of this in my life. This class doesn't mean anything. I don't need this for my degree. Thoughts like that. You don't want to have those thoughts. You don't want to think about this class as if it's a super hard class when you haven't even taken it. My dad actually, gave me probably the best advice that I still use today. And I forget what we were talking about, but I remember he said, nothing is uncomprehendable. Nothing in this world is so hard that it's just uncomprehendable, that you just can't wrap your brain around it. Like nothing is like that, right? So no matter the class, nothing is hard, right? I think we as humans, make everything extremely hard. We will take something that is very simplistic and turn it into rocket science, right? And you have to really control your mind and your thoughts. And I feel like, that is where most students go wrong in some of these harder classes, like, chemistry 1 and 2, is they just let their mindset get the best of them. They, have these negative thoughts, and your mindset is 50% of the game. If you have a positive attitude and a positive mindset, you're halfway there, right? And then after that, you just need to do the baby steps, put in the work, the effort, the energy that the class needs to really do well. But the mindset is 50% of the game. So make sure that you have a positive mindset going into both of these classes and realize that it's not that complicated. It's not rocket science. It's all comprehensible, at the end of the day. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is make sure that you're brushed up on your algebra skills. Gen Chem 1 and Gen Chem 2 is math intense. I don't really think it was like super crazy math intense, but you are going to be doing a lot of calculations, especially when you get to stoichiometry and things of that nature in Gen Chem 1. In Gen Chem 2, you're going to be doing a lot of math calculations as well with thermodynamics and stuff like that. So make sure you brush up on your algebra. It is all algebra based. Me personally, I don't think algebra is that hard to comprehend. A lot of students that I've spoken to, they act like algebra is just rocket science when it's really not. The best advice I could give for algebra, and I'll definitely make a couple videos on algebra to just kind of help you guys, comprehend that a little bit better. But um, the thing with algebra that you have to realize is you have to really comprehend that in its most simplest form, right? Knowing how to do basic multiplication, division, subtraction, and addition. If you don't comprehend algebra in this lowest state, you're not going to get it here, right? And that was the one thing that I had to learn, because math, algebra at least, is building blocks, right? It's all stacking on top of each other. They're just really teaching you the same thing, right? Every new concept is based on those four fundamentals: multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, right? So as long as you can comprehend algebra in its most simplistic form, then you can get it in its most difficult form. So it's just algebra. It's not rocket science, but make sure that you're brushed up on your algebra skills, because if you're not, then this class is going to be super duper difficult for you. So if you're going in with a negative mindset and you're not good at algebra, then you're probably not going to make it out of this class. So make sure that you're good at algebra. You can buy algebra practice books on Amazon that you can just work out of and practice out of every single day. I did that when I was studying for my math ACT. I even graded myself, and that helped a lot. That helped, really make sure that algebra was ingrained in my long-term memory. So that's the second thing. The third thing I would say is make sure that you guys give these classes the time, energy, and effort it deserves. One thing that, I think a lot of people still don't comprehend is that your grade is not based on your intellect. It is not based on how smart you are. It don't have nothing to do with none of that. It has everything to do with your time, energy, and effort, right? How much of that are you giving to this class? You can't expect to get an A if you're giving D level effort, right? If you're barely studying, if you're not going to office hours, if you're not asking for help, if you're not putting in the work that it takes to wrap your brain around these concepts, learn this material, then you can't really expect to get a good grade out of this class, right? So every class has a certain amount of time, energy, and effort that it demands from you. And you have to make sure that you give it that. You have to make sure that you are really putting in that time, energy, and effort. And for every student, it's different. In my opinion, there's two types of student. There's the student that has a really good intellectual capacity where they can process information fast and they still have to study, but they don't have to study as much. And then there's the student that isn't blessed with that gift and they just have to really study really hard, right? And I think you need to know which student that you are, know if you are that student that has, the ability to process information real fast and know if you're the student that's not. Honestly, I'm not, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just working hard, right? But knowing that is half the battle. But regardless, just make sure that you give the class the time, energy, and effort it deserves so that you can do well. And then the last thing I would say is, find somebody to study with. Now, this last one isn't a necessity, but it is helpful. In Gen Chem 1, I didn't really have anyone to study with. I kind of did that solo. Gen Chem 2, I had someone to study with. Now, studying, with my friend in Gen Chem 2 was really helpful. He really did show me a lot of, different ways to study the material faster rather than trying to read out the book because that is kind of my method. My parents instilled a very old school method of studying in me. So, I'm the kind of person that buys the book and, reads chapter to chapter, cover to cover. But, he did bring up a really good point, and he said how, that's, you know, you could potentially be wasting a lot of time doing that. And you have to realize that once you start taking on heavier course loads, once you, get into medical school and things like that, they're going to be throwing so much information at you, and you need to find a way to study and process all that information extremely fast. And so I took a different approach. And instead of reading out the book, I just recorded the lectures, and then I would re-listen to those lectures while going over the lecture slides, which really helped because not only was I reading the lecture slides, but I could also hear my teacher break down and explain and elaborate on some of the concepts on the lecture slides, which really, really helped me a lot. And then even on my spare time, I would just listen to the lectures. I just didn't have nothing else to do if I was driving, listen to the lectures, and that just really helped me ingrain everything in my long-term memory. So, studying with somebody is very helpful because they can give you a different viewpoint on how to go about acing that class, right? You might be used to doing something one way, but you don't know every way, right? There's a bunch of different ways to go about, doing well in the class. And the only way that you're going to learn different methods and know what works for you is if you, sit down with people and study with other people and see what are they doing, how are they doing good in this class, what are some of their methods, what are some of the study habits that they have to do well in this class. And it's not about, finding the smartest person to study with. It doesn't have to be the smartest person in the classroom because at the end of the day, even if you're studying with somebody who's struggling, well, it's going to make you study harder because you're going to have to teach them, right? So it's not about, finding, the brainiac in the class. You can study with anybody, but trying to help each other and teach each other is going to really help you to study harder, because you can't teach somebody else if you don't know what you're talking about, right? So again, studying with somebody isn't a necessity, I don't believe, but it is very helpful. I think that it was very helpful for me to have that in Gen Chem 2. I do think that that is part of the reason why I did really, really well in that class compared to Gen Chem 1. I think if I would have had that in Gen Chem 1, I think I would have at least got an A minus. So those are the four things that I feel that, if you do these things, then you will do well in Gen Chem 1 and Gen Chem 2. So just to recap, make sure that you have a positive mindset going into the classroom. Make sure that you are giving these classes the time, energy, and effort they deserve. Make sure you brush up on your algebra skills, and make sure, or try to find somebody that you can study with. And if you do these four things, I guarantee you'll do well in the class, right? You'll get at least a B or better. So that's it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you all learned something, and I'll see you on the next clip.